Thanks so much for joining us on Morning Live Sport. Now, the Kyalami Grand Prix Circuit has received approval to amend its design, opening the possibility of Formula One returning to South Africa. Constructed in 1961, the original Kyalami Circuit was the home of the South African Grand Prix, which hosted 21 F1 Grand Prix races. The last F1 Grand Prix was in South Africa was hosted in 1993, and that was just a year before South Africa transitioned to democracy. So to talk about this and to also get some F1 updates, we are chatting to Motorsport SA CEO Vic Maharaj. Vic, thanks so much for joining us. Kyalami is now on track to receive a Grade 1 homologation, which is just a fancy word for a few upgrades that have been cleared by the FIA. Tell us all about it, and then we'll get into the actual bid.
Yeah, absolutely, Stacey. I think importantly, the Kyalami Grand Prix Circuit management have initiated the procedure to homologate the circuit to F1 FIA Grade 1. What that basically means, it can essentially host any type of FIA World Championship race, including Formula One. Currently, the circuit is called FIA Grade 2. So they've taken that situation to move it through to Grade 1 homologation. I must just emphasize that that is completely independent of the bids that we as the BSC are evaluating. So it's got no relevance to us when we actually look at the bids. I think it's just a good thing for South Africa. It's a good thing for the African continent that I guess a facility can brag that it is currently or will be the only facility in the near future on the African continent that is FIA Grade 1.
But I mean, this must help and bolster the bid, because ultimately whoever else bids is going to need this homologation done or this grade to be certified and approved, as they won't be able to move past the final clearance ultimately, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the major hurdles is the venue. And the venue has to be FIA Grade 1 certified before it can even be considered to hold an F1 Grand Prix. So these are one of the major hurdles. And I guess Kyalami is wanting to demonstrate their willingness and their readiness that if a bid is chosen and they are the venue, that they are ready and capable of hosting a Formula One race.
And what does it mean in terms of the continental bid to have a race in Africa in general? Because Morocco is looking at doing something, Rwanda is looking at doing something. Do they have any tracks or any facilities that are even close to what Kyalami is currently at in terms of F2 or F1? Grade 1 and Grade 2, rather.
No worries, Stacey. I think it's absolutely valid point. There is no other facility on the continent that is at a state of readiness as the Kyalami Grand Prix Circuit. So I think it will give a big tick of credibility to South Africa when we are ready to pitch to Formula One management for a Formula One Grand Prix. And I think, in my opinion, the Rwandan bid, the Moroccan bid, is probably a good 2 to 3 years behind us in a state of readiness in terms of a venue. So the real point here is that we hopefully at the front of the queue to try and get that race on the African continent. And we know that there is a priority with Formula One management, with the FIA, to get a Formula One race in Africa, because how can you declare a world champion if you don't race on one continent?
100%. What are the deadlines that we're dealing with here for submissions? And I know that we spoke briefly off air that a candidate hasn't been chosen. It's something that is imminent. As I mentioned, you're keeping us on tenterhooks. Give us some updates there.
Look, I think the reality of the situation is the bid steering committee has to create or carry out due process. We have to make sure that the bid that we recommend to the minister is, I wouldn't say bulletproof, but the best possible one that we can say is a good candidate to host the event. I think the reality is that we're probably looking probably in the next couple of weeks to make an announcement. Formula One management hasn't got a specific deadline, but we have to move quickly, because realistically they would start closing off the 2027 calendar in the next couple of months. So I would think that it's the public should be ready for announcements quite soon.
So let's look at some of these upgrades that need to be made. Toby Fenter was saying that Apex Circuit Design said they're just minor engineering upgrades. In other words, that speaks to the quality of the current track. Obviously, there was a major upgrade done in around 2016. For perhaps non-motorsports enthusiasts, what do these upgrades mean? What are they?
So there's certain areas that the runoffs need to be increased, in terms of the speed of the current Formula One cars and the top speeds that they reach. They've got high energy, so if there's an impact, the car needs to be slowed down, and for safety to be ensured for the driver, the competitors, the officials, and the spectators. So there's certain areas on the track that needs a bit more runoff. The curbing needs to be more Formula One specific. So weirdly enough, looking at the specifications that need to be done, it's not as dramatic as was expected. So that obviously makes it very advantageous that Kyalami is very confident that they will be ready for the 2027 bid if the bidder is the one chosen for their facility. So we're looking, from what we were told at the press conference, that Apex will have the engineering specification completed by the end of the year, and then it's up to Kyalami to essentially get the actual civils done probably within the year. So if they can get it done towards the back end of 2026, there's just then, from that perspective, one more inspection where an FIA inspector will come out, will then essentially walk the track, go through it, and see if there's any other specifications or updates that need to be done. But in terms of what I've seen in circuit design for the last 20 years, it is actually quite small changes that are required.
So let's actually quickly talk about the track, because the upgrades won't affect the 4.5 kilometer circuit layout. Some people have compared its length and design to many other F1 tracks, but the corner mix is similar to Imola, and yet Imola has been taken off the calendar, and we have those two Spanish Grand Prix. The overtaking potential has come up, that perhaps it's similar to Spa or to Baku even, and then altitude-wise, Johannesburg perhaps is comparative to Mexico City.
Yeah, look, I think it sits in the middle of most of the tracks. It is kind of high speed in terms of the length of the straight. It is within the specifications required by Formula One. So we do expect that with DRS enabled overtaking, it should be a good overtaking track. The inner precinct of the track with Sunset Corner, Crocodiles, the S's going up to the old West Bank corner, it's really big elevation changes, high altitude. So it'll be a challenge for the teams, for the engineers, to make sure the engines are optimized, to make sure that the downforce levels are properly spec'd for the Kyalami track. It is really a exciting circuit, and the one thing I can say is that every F1 driver that has driven here always says that it's a shame and a travesty that there isn't a Formula One Grand Prix at Kyalami due to the layout of it.
Well, we remain hopeful. Vic, I wanted to ask you so many questions, even what's happening at McLaren. It's almost reminiscent of the Alain Prost, Ayrton Senna scenario, but I think I'll bring you back before the Austrian Grand Prix. Can we agree to that, rather? And we'll chat about that and what's happening at Ferrari as well.
Absolutely.
Awesome. We've been chatting to SA Motorsport CEO Vic Maharaj, just giving his insights into what's happened around the upgrades that have now been approved by the FIA for that Kyalami circuit. It's very exciting news. As he mentioned, we are hoping that we're going to get an African event on the F1 calendar, and hopefully it might be here in Johannesburg or perhaps in Cape Town. We'll have to wait and see, but it's still exciting news nonetheless.